Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode 115. There are two ways through life, the way of human nature and the way of grace. You have to choose which one you'll follow. Grace doesn't try to please itself, accepts being slighted, forgotten, disliked, accepts being insulted and injured. Human nature only wants to please itself, get others to please it too, to have its own way, to find reasons to be unhappy when all of the world is shining around it and love is smiling through all things. Terrence Malick.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by VideoBlocks. Now, VideoBlocks is a subscription-based stock media company that gives you unlimited access to premium stock footage everyone could afford. If you're looking for like extra exterior shots or things that you might want to incorporate into any of your projects, whether that be a narrative, documentary, music videos, commercials, these guys got you covered. They've got unlimited daily downloads from a library of over 115,000 HD video clips, as well as a huge selection of After Effects templates for like opening credits, motion graphics titles, company logos, as well as motion backgrounds as well. It's pretty amazing. And on average, subscribers pay less than $1 per download in a course of a year. And the content does not get stale. They're constantly adding new content to the library every month. So it keeps it very, very fresh, and you always have something new to look forward to. And everything you download is 100% royalty free. Even if your subscription is canceled, you have unrestricted usage rights for anything you want to do, including personal projects and commercial projects. And you keep whatever you download and maintain the usage rights forever. Now, VideoBlocks is offering The Tribe a yearly subscription for $99. That's $50 off the usual price tag, just for you guys, just for The Tribe. That's less than $10 a month. So to get this deal, just head over to videoblocks.com/hustle. That's VideoBlocks, VIDEO blocks.com/hustle for this exclusive offer. Don't forget to head over to filmfestivaltips.com to download my free guide, and I'll show you how I was able to get into over 600 international film festivals for either cheap or free. So guys, if you hear my voice being a little bit hoarse, it's because my lovely daughters have given me a cold. And I got this lovely dry cough. I don't know if you guys, anybody out there who has children, understand it. They are petri dishes and bring home all sorts of just disgusting things that you catch and make your life generally miserable. So that's why my voice is a little bit more hoarse than usual. But regardless of that, the show must go on. So real quick, before we get into the meat of the show, I have a little bit of updates for you. I've got some exciting news that I'm going to have to hold on to just for a little bit longer till everything gets finalized. No, it's not any film festival news yet. We're waiting for some news on some festivals that we submitted to. So as soon as I know something positive, I will let you guys know. But there is some exciting news of some stuff that I'm finishing up right now. But I can tell you that I will be at Sundance this year. Not with This Is Meg. We're still waiting to hear back from Sundance. So we'll let you know about that. But regardless of that, I'm going to be at Sundance. And you're going to be able to see Sundance or experience Sundance through the Indie Film Hustle lens, through my eyes. And I'm going to be doing some very cool podcasting from there, as well as some videos. And we're going to be doing a lot of cool stuff there. So I want to take you guys on the journey that I go through at Sundance, which is going to be fun. I've been at Sundance probably about 3 or 4 times prior to this trip, but I have not gone in a better part of almost a decade now. So I'm very excited to be going back, and I'm going back not only for myself, but I want to go back for you guys. I want you guys to experience what I'm going to experience there, and hopefully we'll have a movie either at Sundance or Slamdance. We'll let you know. But regardless, I'm going to have a lot of fun while I'm there, and I'm going to share as much information and knowledge as I can with you guys the Indie Film Hustle tribe. Also, if you thought 2016 was a busy year for Indie Film Hustle and me, I have a lot of plans for 2017. I made my first feature in 2016 with your guys' help, and I'm very proud and excited, and I cannot wait to share it with you guys. But in 2017, I plan to take things to another level, not only with Indie Film Hustle, but with directing more features, plural, and other things that I have planned. So keep an eye out, and I will keep you informed as new information presents itself, guys. Now, today we have a really cool guest. His name is Steve Stockman. I read his book, How to Shoot Video That Doesn't Suck. And when I read it, I was really impressed with him. And I reached out to Steve to see if he'd come on the show, and he said he would. And Steve, after doing research on Steve is not just an author. He is a producer, a director. He directed a movie called 2 Weeks, he wrote and directed a movie called 2 Weeks, starring Academy Award winning Sally Field. And we talk a little bit about how it's like to work with an actress of her caliber, as well as a great cast too. It's an amazing cast. And now he's a producer on shows for A&E and Esquire magazine for Food Network, and has done easily over 200 different web series, music videos, commercials, and so on. And his book, How to Shoot Video That Doesn't Suck, is now in its 6th printing. And I found out is the best-selling cinematography book on the market. So it's pretty amazing. So I really wanted to dig in with Steve about how to shoot video that doesn't suck, as well as all of his other experience of being in the industry. So enjoy my conversation with Steve Stockman. I'd like to welcome to the show Steve Stockman, man. Thanks so much for jumping on the Indie Film Hustle podcast.
Well, thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it.
No problem, man. No problem. So I always like to start the episodes with the origin story. So how did you get into the crazy film business?
Well, I started in the crazy radio business.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I was a kid, my dreams, when I was 8 years old, I can still remember, I dreamed of going into radio and going into film.
Mm-hmm.
And I started in radio when I was in high school. And so when I got to college, I continued and sort of went from there. And I had a career in radio at first. Mm-hmm. But I've always been a marketer. And I've always loved how marketing works. And I used to, sit around as a little kid and count the number of cuts in TV commercials and all kinds of other odd behavior. And I always loved movies. So as I went through radio, doing radio marketing, I got involved in a lot of television campaigns for radio formats and started doing that from the client side. And when I left radio, I started doing it from the production company side. I started a production company called Custom Productions, which is now in Los Angeles. And we did television campaigns for entertainment clients. So we did TV commercials to promote radio stations all over the world. We did TV commercials to promote home video releases from Buena Vista and other large companies. And we eventually, still do commercials occasionally, do web stuff occasionally, but I moved it to Los Angeles and got involved in independent film and now television.
Very cool. So, yeah, because you have a voice for radio. No
Thank
question.
You. It's my dad's. I can't really take much credit for it. It's my dad's voice.
So then what inspired you to write your book, How to Shoot Video That Doesn't Suck?
Well,
great title, by the way.
Thank you. I was getting a lot of questions about online video. And this started maybe 5 or 6 years ago when online video started to mainstream and when phones started to be reasonable things to shoot video on. And it started to be like a doctor in a cocktail party, except instead of saying, hey, could you look at this boil on my neck? People would say, I just shot this video and you're a director. Could you look at this? Mm-hmm. And so I'd get these videos, and a lot of times they had the same kinds of issues with them. And I'd been teaching a course at this thing called Summer Stars Camp for the Performing Arts, which is a nonprofit camp that takes 11 to 14-year-olds from the inner city and gives them an intensive arts experience for 10 days. And I'd been teaching how to shoot music videos. And I had thought that those kids didn't know anything about how to shoot because they were underprivileged and they didn't have video cameras and all that. What I realized when the internet boom hit is that nobody knows anything about shooting video, principally because until 6 years ago, nobody except professionals ever did.
Right.
You know, you'd have your home video occasionally, but nobody really knew how to do it. We never asked anybody to do it. And so I had taught this course for these kids, and I was getting asked more and more about how to do video. And I was hiking with a friend of mine in Joshua Tree, a radio guy, actually, an old friend of mine whose producer had called me 2 days earlier to show me a video, which sounded terrific and was so boring that it was unwatchable. And, you know, we were talking about it, and he asked me some advice. And I went, wait a minute, I wonder if anyone has written this book. And so I went back to my hotel room that night, and instead of, you know, surfing porn like a good American, I searched for video books, and all of the books that I could find were technical video books. They were about, you know, how to do 3-point lighting and how many P's in your HD and how do you plug your computer into your camera. And that stuff not only doesn't interest me because as a director, I generally have other people do that. But it also isn't the thing that's going to make your film or video successful. And so I came up with this great idea, and I put this book together, called it How to Shoot Like a Hollywood Director, and called another friend of mine in radio and told him about it. And he said, well, I don't really care if my guys shoot like Hollywood directors. I just wish they could shoot video that didn't suck. And I went, oh, well, that's much better title than what I had. So I went with that. So that's the origin story of the book.
Now, so what are some of the biggest mistakes you see people make when shooting videos? And again, a lot of the stuff we're talking about, guys, is about people just shooting, you know, online videos and things like that. But a lot of these lessons can definitely be translated over to filmmakers as well. So what are some of the biggest mistakes, Steve, that you've seen with people shooting videos?
I think the biggest mistake is to not think in shots. And that's kind of both a superficial and deep thing to talk about, because we know, especially if we shoot indie film already, or we do lots of our own videos already, and we pay attention to this stuff, we know that most shots in a feature film or a movie or a great video produced today are somewhere between half a second and 5 seconds long at most. You know, and rarely are you going to see a much longer shot without some sort of change on the screen. But people don't really think about, first, when they're starting out, they don't even realize that. And so they tend to let the camera roll a long time. And secondly, they don't think about how those shots are constructed and how that affects the overall movie process. So the first thing that I tell people who are just starting out is to practice shooting in shots, and start your shot when something interesting is about to happen, and stop it when that interesting thing has happened, and then move somewhere else and shoot something different. And that's a real eye-opener for people, because even if you just do that on your home vacation video, you will go from having horrible, boring videos that last 3 hours to, you know, having a 3-minute entertaining video sort of fall out of your camera. And that's maybe the first biggest mistake people make.
And so what are some tips you can give indie filmmakers that they can kind of take away from the book?
I think the first thing for indie filmmakers to think about is that film is a medium that has story embedded in every single moment of it. So what I mean by that, my metaphor for this is a little obscure, but holograms, you know, when holograms were invented, and even now, if you shoot a hologram and you print it to film and you look at it, you can see a 3-dimensional image on this flat sheet of paper. What's really interesting about a hologram, though, is if you cut that sheet of film and you take away one section of it, that section will have the complete hologram on it. So it's not like a photograph where if you cut a corner off it, you're just cutting that corner of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Every piece of a hologram has embedded in it the full picture,
Mm-hmm.
which is fascinating. But I like to say that every piece of a film has story embedded in it. So the big picture of the film is, that there's a kid who's stuck on a farm working with his aunt and uncle, and he hates it, and he's dying to have an adventure and get off this dusty planet and see the world, right? And the big
That sounds familiar. That sounds familiar.
It is a little familiar.
It's a little familiar.
Big picture. Did he live where?
No. It sounds a little familiar. I think some guy named George. I think it's like
George.
George something or other.
So the big picture is the story of this kid, and the kid is the hero. And the story is how he goes from living on a farm to taking a giant journey to rescue a princess to destroying the Death Star, right? Mm-hmm. That's the big picture. But if you take the next smallest unit of film, which is the sequence, inside that film, there are different complete stories being told. There's a sequence where the kid meets a magician and they decide they are going to leave the planet. And so the hero of the sequence is, it's still this kid. And in the beginning, he meets the magician. And in the middle, he negotiates with a rogue ship captain to get transport off the planet. And at the end, they run away from people who are after them and manage to escape. And that's a sequence that takes 7-8 minutes in the film, and it's part of the bigger picture, but it has its own story, its own hero, its beginning and middle and end. The next unit down is the scene. And inside this sequence about escaping the planet, there is a scene where the magician and the boy go into a bar to negotiate with the rogue ship captain. And the hero of that scene is the rogue ship captain. And you learn about what he's thinking in terms of how he can get the best deal and get off the planet before he's killed. And so at the beginning, he meets the magician and the boy, and in the middle, he negotiates a deal, and at the end, he agrees. And that's that scene, which goes inside the sequence, which goes inside the film. But inside the scene, there are shots, and the shots also have a hero beginning, middle, and an end. So there's a shot where we're looking outside the window, and there's a bounty hunter who turns his head and recognizes the rogue captain as someone worthy of capture. And in that one shot, the hero is the bounty hunter. The beginning is he sees the captain, and the middle is he expresses surprise, and the end is he calls somebody, right? And that's just a shot. That's like 4 seconds of time on the screen. But that's a complete story too. And so usually, bad film and television can be fixed by looking at whether every single level of what you're making has a hero beginning, middle, and end from each individual shot all the way to the finished piece. And if every single piece of it works as a story, then the whole will work as a story much better.
That's really great advice, actually. A lot of filmmakers don't.
You sound surprised.
No, not from you, but just generally speaking. It's that so many filmmakers don't understand that there are multiple elements, and I think also if you break it down that way, it lessens the beast, the mountain that you have to climb. Because if you look at, I've got to entertain somebody for 90 minutes. If you go under that big, huge Mount Everest, that's a huge deal. But if you start breaking it down, like sequence, scene, shot, it really does make it a lot easier. And then it's like baking a cake. You've got to learn the ingredients. You can't just look at the cake and just throw a bunch of stuff in the oven. You've got to understand each ingredient and how they work together and so on. So
yeah, and I would say it also goes to, the level of pitch. When you're pitching someone your story in 3 sentences, you have to have a clear beginning, middle, and maybe you don't give them the whole end, but you intrigue them with how it might end, and you have to know who the hero is. And so in every part of the development process and the shooting process and the scripting process, you can be running this story check for every single piece of it, and that will keep you in tune all the time.
Now you've directed a few things in your day. So I wanted
Yes.
a couple things from that I've done my research on you. So you've been directing for a little while now. What
Little while.
A little while. You just got out of school last week, I think, or so.
Yes.
You're okay.
But for a 24-year-old, I have a lot of experience.
Exactly. Same here, my friend. Same here. So, do you have any directing advice for first-time filmmakers, like going on set, how to deal with that whole pressure? Because I know I was a first-time filmmaker at one point, and even on a small set, it was very intimidating. So do you have any advice maybe for preparation or how to deal with the politics of a set, all that kind of stuff?
Yes. The big picture advice is that you're always walking a line between controlling and allowing.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that is that every part of a director's job is to find the right place at the right moment on that line. Directors who try to control every single thing prevent themselves from hearing good ideas from their collaborators, and they prevent people from doing their best work because they interrupt other people's ideas. They don't make people feel like they're contributing. They don't hear suggestions that people make that might be huge improvements or problem solvers. So if you're not open, if you're totally closed and controlling, you will never get the best out of your collaborators. And on the flip side, if you have no idea what you're doing and you let everyone tell you what to do, you will have a directionless film that will not be on time and not be on budget and probably not be any good. Mm-hmm. So every step of the director's process is walking that line. And some of my favorite examples, are like The Godfather, which is, arguably one of the best movies of all time in terms mm-hmm. of the way it's put together. And they're shooting the opening scenes of The Godfather, which start in the dark and then open on Marlon Brando's office. And in that scene, Marlon Brando is famously petting a cat. Mm-hmm. That cat was a stray that happened to be on the lot that Brando picked up and started petting, and it became part of that scene. And it told you a lot about Brando's character, that he was, old world, and he was a nice guy. And oh, surprise, he can have people killed. And that was a big deal, that revelation, mm-hmm. that we were going to understand this guy as a human being and as a monster. And that cat wasn't on the set. Now, if Francis Coppola had been the kind of director who tries to control everything, he would have said, well, there's no cat in my script. And I didn't picture this with a cat. Get that cat. That cat's bothering me. Mm-hmm. And instead, he trusted his actor, and he allowed the cat, and he shot the scene, which is masterful.
And he also allowed those cotton balls in his mouth.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot he allowed on that set, and I of course have all the fan books on The Godfather, mm-hmm. since it's probably my favorite movie of all time. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't seen it, you should see it at least 5 times this week.
Yes, everybody. Yes. It's like an oracle. The Godfather is an oracle. If you have a problem with life, the answer's in The Godfather. And I think Tom Hanks was saying that, I think years ago. I saw him, I think on The Tonight Show or something like that. And he would just refer to any time there's a problem, just the answer is in The Godfather.
Yes, and anytime you want to be humbled as a filmmaker, you should watch it as well, because there's stuff in there that just you will never be able to do, no matter what.
I miss Francis, man. I really miss Francis. I wish he'd come out and do some stuff. I was watching. I didn't mean to take you off note, but I was watching De Palma, the new documentary.
Mm-hmm. De Palma. I meant to say, I have not seen that yet, but I'm a fan. So.
It's a great doc. It's just Brian De Palma just completely unleashed. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
So he just says whatever he wants to say. But it was really interesting that he said one thing, and I try to go back, and there's only very few exceptions, but he said that when you study directors, you're really going to talk about the movies they made in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. Mm-hmm. Not like maybe more, sometimes 20s, but mostly 30s, 40s, and 50s. And then mm-hmm. after that, you don't hear from them anymore. Like those films that they make in their 60s and 70s are just not the same. And there's very few. Like Martin Scorsese is the only guy I can really think of off the top of my head. That's
Woody
like
Allen.
Woody Allen, obviously. Yeah, another guy. But it was very interesting. And Francis, I mean, he's Francis Ford Coppola, for God's sakes. I just wish he would come back. I really wish he'd come back and do something like and just blow everybody out of the water one more time.
There you go, Francis. You heard it here.
You heard it. Yes, if Francis is listening. But you were saying, I didn't mean to interrupt you in regards to The Godfather and the.
Well, we were talking about finding that line of how to be a first-time director. Mm-hmm. So I think the second thing that comes up a lot, if you're a first-time director, you don't know what you're doing. And if you're really smart, you may have hired people who do. So right. You may have a line producer or a grip or a sound guy or a gaffer or actors who have made more movies than you. Hopefully your entire crew is not there for the first time.
Oosh, yes.
And I think it's a strength, not a weakness, to be able to say, hey, look, guys, my first movie, my first day on a set. And I really appreciate all your support. I'm going to listen to any suggestion. If I can't do it, I'm really sorry, because I do have to keep to schedule, because obviously we're a low-budget production. But I really do want the suggestions, and I will really try to listen. And if you have something important to say, please bring it to my attention so that I can include it in my planning for what I'm going to do next. And by saying that, what you're saying is, I want to hear you, but I'm still going to decide, because that's my job. And the only way I'm going to learn my job is by doing it, and deciding and maybe getting it wrong. But I'm not going to decide like an idiot without listening to the people who know better first. Mm-hmm. But I am going to decide. And that to me is striking a first-timer balance. People who try to hide that they're first-timers or try to pretend they know more than they do get in trouble, because it becomes very obvious very quickly that they're full of shit.
Oh no!
And you don't want that to happen on a set.
Oh no! The crew, a seasoned crew will smell it in the first 5 minutes.
Yes, but they'll help you if you're willing to be helped.
Exactly, that's the thing. And I've been on sets with, guys who've been in the business for 40 or 50 years, and some of them are very gracious, some of them are ball busting. Mm-hmm. So it all depends on who you hire. But I think it was. Is it Woody Allen or De Palma? Someone said that 90% of directing is casting, and not only casting.
I think a lot of people have said that. I think it's in my book as well.
Yeah, I think it's not only casting your actors, but casting your crew.
Yes, if you're doing it right, I think the righter you're doing it, the closer you come to the Tao of directing. Which is to touch without touching. Which is to get what you want with a very minimal amount of effort, and where you're focused on flow and team function and how things move forward, rather than being focused on how am I going to control everything.
Right.
You set the vision. When you're doing a big feature, 2 weeks was not a giant feature, but there were still 100 people working on it every day. Mm-hmm. And, if you're doing a feature correctly, or a commercial correctly, or a TV show correctly, you should be setting the vision as the director. You should be clear in communicating that vision, and you should take input, make decisions, and then help people execute their version of your vision. And only stick your nose in and correct things that are close to done and just aren't going to work and really aren't better than what you had in your head. And let the rest of it play and let people bring stuff to the table.
Absolutely. And you bring up 2 weeks. That was a film that you directed and produced, right? With
yes,
and wrote as well. So, and it stars Oscar winner Sally Field, which was amazing. And you had a great cast, by the way. I saw the cast that you had involved with that movie. Really great group of actors. Can you tell us a little bit about?
Yes.
Yeah, how did you get the film off the ground?
Well, this was another interesting lesson for me. I wrote a bunch of scripts, because I've always been a writer, and I wrote commercials, and I've written my whole life, and so I moved to Los Angeles with my commercial production company because I wanted to do features and I knew I'd never do them in Boston, which is where I was living at the time, even though I love Boston. And so I came to LA to kind of immerse myself in this environment, and also because I had to tell people what I was doing. And once I told them, I would be humiliated if I didn't actually do it. So it was sort of a self-management thing.
Right.
So I came to LA and I started writing, and my scripts were reasonably well received. You know, some agents were interested, lawyers were interested, but it wasn't. They weren't kicking ass. They were kind of high concept things.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother died like a few years before I got around to this, and I had made notes on my hard drive at the time just because it was a very weird and obviously painful experience, but it was also kind of interesting. So I wrote a lot of stuff at the time. And then, but I didn't look at it for like 5 years. And I was hunting around for the next idea to write. And I was thinking high concept this and high concept that. And then I kept going back to these notes and finally decided that it was a pretty interesting experience and I would write about it. And when I did that, I did some readings, some cast readings, you know, to hear how it played on its feet and stuff. And the difference between that and the earlier scripts I had written was night and day. It was, people loved it, they cried at the end, and they all wanted to be in it. And
that's a good sign.
This was where I learned another key entertainment rule, which is if you find that you're pushing the boulder uphill all the time, it's probably time to find a new boulder. You know, the difference between a script that people like well enough and a script that inspires them to actually do things is night and day. And it became so easy to get people involved. So I took that script and I did some readings and I raised a little bit of money. And I found a casting director who also loved the script and was able to pay her some of the little bit of money I'd collected, which was nowhere near her rate, but it was enough to let her know I was serious. And then she actually, you know, Sally Field was the second 2-time Oscar winner who was attached to this movie in the course of getting it together. And, you know, and we were able to get a cast because she believed in what we were doing and we had some money. And then as we started assembling cast, we assembled more money until finally we had enough to actually make the movie. And we got cast and movie at more or less the same time and went ahead on it.
That's awesome. Now, but how do you direct a legendary actress like Sally Field?
How do you? I think you try to stay out of her way. I'm not sure I did it wasn't the most fun experience I've ever had. I really owe a lot to Sally because she came into the movie and she really stuck with it and she did everything she said she was going to do. And she gave a great performance. But there were times where I could feel my inexperience was maybe irritating to her.
Grating on her. Yeah, grating on her, I could imagine.
A little bit. So I learned a lot about that. And so, but I think that this is part of the key to, you know, with great actors or great grips or great other people, you provide them with support. Let them help your vision and stay out of the way. You know, so one of the things I learned on 2 weeks is that some of the actors that I had were better after their third take, and some of the actors I had only had 3 takes in them. And so figuring out when to shoot whose close-ups, you know, became kind of an interesting thing I had never really considered in commercials. You know, you don't worry about that in commercials. You just tell the actor to stand there and smile and eat the pizza, and they do it, or they're fired. You know, but if you have you know, an Oscar-winning actor or a really experienced, you know, really great cast, they have a way that they work best, and if you can't figure that out, you're doing a disservice to the project. So I think that all of 2 weeks was me learning how to work with a big cast that had different working styles and try to make it all come together.
Now you've actually worked. So that was an indie film, correct? It wasn't a studio finance film. You found financing outside the studio system.
Financed it. MGM released it theatrically, and you can find it in, frequently on Netflix and Amazon and all that stuff.
Okay. So then you've done indie films, but you also are producing hit shows like Devil's Ride and Brew Dogs. Can you tell us a little bit of the difference between doing indie films and doing, shows like that?
Yeah, I think that the difference is that you're working with non-actors.
Mm-hmm.
And yet for me, by the way, I don't know if I do reality television the right way or not, but it's the only way I know how to do it because I am a narrative guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I do my unscripted television very narrative style. And so, for example, on Brew Dogs, which is the story of two Scottish guys who run a brewery called Brew Dog, who've just opened, by the way, their newest brewery in Columbus, Ohio. So now they're in the States, but they were in 32 countries at the time that we started working with them. And we did this series for the Esquire Network, where you can still find it. And these couple of young guys, 30 years old, came to the United States to brew craft beers, stunt craft beers with the world's best craft breweries. So we went to Stone Brewing, and we brewed a beer using the world's hottest chili pepper, and we brewed it in a 1940s railway car that we turned into a brewery and hooked it up to the Amtrak Pacific Surfliner, and we had to brew the beer between the time we went from San Diego to LA and back.
Nice.
And it's that kind of thing. And that's so you're working with non-actors in a sense, although James and Martin are terrific hosts and got even better as the series progressed. But they're interacting with real people and they're in real situations. But a lot of what we did was well planned and thoroughly produced. So even though we weren't writing lines for people, we were setting up situations in which we expected something fun to happen, and it did. And then sometimes we had to change our plans going forward to accommodate what had already happened, and that was fine. So it was kind of a cross between kind of an improvisational version of television. And I'm just shooting a pilot now for that I can't talk in too much detail about, but it's a sitcom about a couple with a new child. Mm-hmm. And they're famous musicians. And this thing, it's like not reality like the Kardashians. It's more like a reality version of Modern Family, mm-hmm. where these are people who are naturally funny, and if we put them in situations that are fun and we can do intelligent, really interesting kind of classic sitcom style comedy in an unscripted setting, where again, we're not writing lines, but we are doing a little bit of improvisation, and we are putting them in situations that they really have to do, but we think will be fun to watch. And so again, just going back to the story point, we're bringing this hero, beginning, middle, and end into unscripted television and saying, okay, let's plan this like a movie, and let's make sure that our story is good from the time we plan it to the time we finish shooting it. It doesn't mean we're not going to switch things around or improvise on the fly or try something different if what we're doing doesn't work, but it means when we go into the field, we're going to have a really good idea of what's going to happen, and it's going to be a really solid story, which we'll trash if we need to, but we're prepped when we go out. And I think that's different than the way a lot of people do it.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Now, I wanted to ask you something. As a filmmaker and also as a content creator, what are your feelings of the changing landscape and distribution? The indie flicks, the Amazon Video Direct, the iTunes, the whole streaming thing, and how many different opportunities there are, not just for indie filmmakers, but also for showrunners, things like that. What's your feeling on it and how it's changing the game?
I think we're in a little bit of a bubble right now, is my instinct, mm-hmm. where there are lots and lots and lots of sources that have raised lots and lots and lots of money. And so it's possible to take your science fiction series to Comic-Con's digital channel and to Sci-Fi and to A&E if you want, or to Stars or Netflix or any of these other places. And that's great if you're creating great content. Again, going back to the rule of if you make something that people really want, you'll find a place to put it. And so this is awesome. I think it isn't going to last forever. I don't want to say it's like a bubble about to burst, because I don't think that's right. But I think that it's definitely going to contract a little bit as cable networks continue to lose viewers and thus also lose budget. Some of those things are going to get a little harder to do, and some of these digital channels aren't going to work. And so that's going to reduce some outlets going forward. Mm-hmm. But I think it's super exciting right now to be in a place where if you can find sponsorship, or you can make deals, or you can create something awesome, you have an opportunity to put it somewhere where people will see it, and where it will be something you can be proud of and point to that, has way more outlets than there used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And things like Netflix, and specifically like Amazon Video Direct, where now you can literally just upload your own movie or TV show or series and start making money right away. It might not be massive amounts of money, but it's all about marketing as well. How many eyeballs can you push to said format to help you? Mm-hmm. But it's pretty exciting, though. It's pretty exciting. Now, this is my Oprah section of the show, so I'm going to ask you some.
Am I going to cry?
You might cry. I need to know what kind of tree you are.
Okay.
So, what are the lessons that took you the longest to learn, whether in life or in the film industry?
Oh man. Well, surprisingly, it's a lesson I've been quoting for some time, and I think it's in How to Shoot Video That Doesn't Suck as well, but I quote it all the time, and it's a lesson from the great American philosopher Alf, who, as you may recall, was a space alien puppet who was popular on television in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yes.
And Alf said, "The secret to life is to figure out what you don't do well and then don't do it."
That is going to be the quote I start off this episode with, by the way. It's just that's awesome.
Well, it's one of my all-time favorite quotes. And I think I keep repeating it because I'm slow at learning it. So
figure out what you don't do well and don't do it.
Exactly.
That's such a great quote.
So I think, I like to think I'm good at everything, and I think a lot of people do. And in truth, I'm not. I'm not the all-time best business manager on the planet, although I can do a lot of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I have finally gotten to a point where I'm going, if I really want to grow what I'm doing, I'm going to need to bring in some business management help and mm-hmm. have a chief operating officer and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm finally at that point where I'm going, oh, so this is how you actually grow strategically and think about it. But for a long time, I've just sort of kept the company small enough that I did everything, and I realized mm-hmm. I'd really rather be making new shows than negotiating contracts with lawyers, which is how I spend half my day. So
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something I've learned as well. I'm starting to learn now with Indie Film Hustle. Like at a certain point, like you've got to start letting go of the reins and start concentrating on doing what you want to do, and hire good people who can fill those areas for you. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something.
Yes. And I'm very good at that in terms of sets and production and all that. Mm-hmm. And I've always been less good at it in terms of running my business. So mm-hmm. that's the biggest lesson for me, I think. That's been hardest for me to learn.
Now, what are your 3 favorite films of all time? I think I know one of them.
Yes. The Godfather. Mm-hmm. It's funny. I was just wondering if I should look now in the back of How to Shoot Video That Doesn't Suck. There is a complete list of all the films I think are the most influential and important for you to see, mm-hmm. dating back from 06 to nearly the present day, because the book was published a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. Godfather is definitely top of the list. And after that, there's about 10 that are equally wonderful in my mind. So, for example, Mary Poppins is maybe my all-time favorite filmed musical, although you could make a case for Singing in the Rain as well.
I would throw Grease in there as well, but that's just me.
That is just you. Because I certainly would not. In fact, I don't think it's on my list at all. Although it's maybe it depends on how old you were when you saw it.
That's probably, that might have something to do with it.
And other favorite films, I would say, God, that's a tough one because there are so many. It's everything from I'm kind of omnivorous, so I like all kinds of films. So on my list is everything from Jackie Chan's Drunken Master
Genius. Brilliant.
To The Matrix, to Casablanca, to an old sci-fi movie called The Hidden, which is one of my favorite 80s sci-fi feature.
Anything in the 80s. I worked in a video store in the 80s, so I remember video boxes very well in my head. And that was one of those movies like Hidden. I know I've seen that box in my head somewhere.
Oh, it's fantastic. The opening scene just watch the opening scene and then you can turn it off. It's fantastic. It's about a space alien that comes to Earth, and it's kind of a parasite, and it invades people's bodies and then does whatever it wants. And after it kills them, it leaves to the next body.
Is there anybody in it, or is it just a
Kyle MacLachlan is the FBI agent who's tracking this space alien, and he turns out to be a different kind of space alien himself. And Michael Nouri is in it. It's a classic late 80s cast.
Yes, I just looked it up, and yes, I do remember the amazing cover for that with the word hidden cracked in the middle. Oh, that's yes. We had that. We rented that one very well.
So, heavy films, I like stuff like Once Upon a Time in the West, Once Upon a Time in America. I love everything by Preston Sturges.
Oh, God, yeah.
I love most of the early Brian De Palma stuff. I love most of the early David Lynch stuff. Hitchcock, obviously, I've seen all of that and enjoyed it. So,
do you like some of the contemporary guys like Nolan or Fincher?
Yeah, I like Christopher Nolan a lot. I think David Fincher is more my style in a lot of ways, but Memento and the Batman series were awesome, and the other two or three, what's the one with the magician?
Prestige.
The Prestige is pretty interesting, although ultimately not perfect as a movie. And the one where the buildings bend and Leonardo DiCaprio's
Inception. Inception.
Yeah, that's okay. Those are all right. They're not as thoroughly thought out as I'd like, but there's some amazing stuff in them, and he's an amazing director. I mean, on the more modern side, I like Drive.
Oh God, yeah, Nicholas, he's Drive was amazing. It was such a unique voice.
And lately I've been seeing some fairly disappointing movies. I go to the movies a lot, and not a lot sticks. I think I've gotten crankier about this as I get older.
Me too.
It's like, it's kind of like, I don't care what kind of food it is, but it better be the best of its kind.
Right? So perfect.
Thai food, diner food, gourmet French doesn't matter to me as long as it's really good. And if it's not really good, I don't really want to be in the restaurant anymore. Whereas a while back, maybe I would have sat there and eaten the dinner and enjoyed it, but now I've become a professional critic. So was there ever a point in your life that you watched Bloodsport and said, that movie is amazing? I don't think I've watched that movie at all.
Okay. You got to go now when you're done with this interview and watch Bloodsport. Right. And I'm not sure if it's going to hold as well as it did when I saw it in the 80s, but it is wonderful 80s camp and the beginning of all those kind of Bloodsport movies, those fighting movies and, pit fighting and all that stuff. It had Forrest Whitaker in it.
Right.
I mean, it has, of course, Jean-Claude Van Damme doing his, in the height of his career, the height of his Jean-Claude Van Damme is. But anyway, there's movies like you were saying, like as you get older, you kind of put up with less and you get crankier. Like that's kind of where I'm at as well. Like in the 80s, when I was younger, Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme were the greatest actors of all time. But
Right.
as you get older, you're just like, things change. Perspective change, and that's what art does too. What good art does. You should change art should change as you get older.
Yes.
Without question. So
it should.
So where can people find you online? Not like your personal address.
I am my website is stevestockman.com.
Okay.
And there's a lot of stuff that kind of builds on the book and examples from the book and all that other kind of stuff is right there. And I'm on Twitter at Steve Stockman. And that ought to keep you busy for a while. There's a lot of stuff on the website.
Yeah.
So look around, including if people want to ask questions about movies or about how to make things, or if they want to say, hey, here's a video I did, what do you think? Or I was having this particular problem on the set. You can pop me a question, and I use those to spur blog posts. So I will answer your questions online.
Very cool, man. Steve, thank you so much for doing on the show, man. I hope you had a good time.
Thanks for having me. I did. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
Steve was a great guest, man. I had a ball talking to him, and now we hopefully know how not to shoot video that sucks. So I hope you guys got something out of that. And also, Steve created this great little trailer for his book and gives you a bunch of tips on how to make video, how to shoot video that doesn't suck. So I'll include that in the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/115. And as always, please head over to filmmakingpodcast.com and leave us a good review of the show. It really helps us out a lot in the rankings and getting the word out on Indie Film Hustle. And guys, I hope you're enjoying all this new content that I'm creating for Indie Film Hustle. So we were trying to do an article a day, 5 days a week. So either a podcast / article or an article in general. We've been doing we've been getting some really great ones. Especially one that we just posted a little bit ago is where you can go download all of the new contending screenplays, Oscar contending scripts for 2017. And definitely check that out, guys. Just go to indiefilmhustle.com/2017 screenplays. And I've added in a bunch of new screenplays since then. You have all of Stanley Kubrick's screenplays are there, as well as the Oscar-winning and Oscar-nominated scripts from 1999 to 2006. A bunch of the best ofs. So like The Green Mile's there, and a bunch of great screenplays are there as well. So it's a great resource, guys, and I would download them as fast as possible for educational purpose, of course. But the studios will take them down as we get closer to the Oscars or right after the Oscars. So definitely go in there and download and enjoy and read and learn, guys. So, as always, keep that hustle going, keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.